Interview with the Vampire, Season 2, Episode 8, and that's the end of it. There's nothing else. Oh my goodness, guys, they got me. This was a fabulous, perfect, impeccable season finale. It's my new favorite show. I was just so busy taking the show at its word, trying to make these pieces fit together, trying to figure out what was going on and trusting where it was going, that I never even saw the twist right behind me. But this ending explains almost everything wrong with season 2 and might even go a little bit of a ways to waving away some of my issues in season 1. Without further ado, let's dive into those characters. Starting with Daniel. Guys, the man has a plan and he's actually attacking inconsistencies I care about and have been bothering me since day one. Looking at my notes here from the show, I just wrote,
oh my god, just blew Armand's life up.
And I still feel that way about it. Like that bomb he drops when he's like,
maybe it was Lestat who saved you.
Hell yes!
Go ahead and press X to doubt the Armand and Louis relationship, because I haven't understood their connection this whole time. And now it is sort of circling back to the idea that Armand is obsessed and Louis is just there. Oh my god, Daniel finally did something useful and impressive. And this being the second interview suddenly makes so much more sense. This reveal, fucking amazing. And it puts a lot of the thematic elements back on track for the book. My next note was,
man, I don't think Daniel's gonna survive this.
And I guess technically he doesn't, since even though Louis makes Armand promise not to hurt Daniel, he does turn him into a vampire. Since Daniel was dying of a fatal disease as a mortal, this might technically qualify as not harming him. Daniel does get to live on as it was. But it is fascinating because we just got that long diatribe about how Armand finds turning other people icky. We got that flashback in the 70s where Armand is like jealous of Daniel and Louis' connection, obsessed with figuring out what Louis likes about him. And in this way, he's made like an immortal rival for Louis' affections. I don't know that Armand has another chance in hell with Louis in this show. It seems like a confused revenge motive for him to have turned Daniel. I'm still excited about it though, because this puts us 100% back on track for where things were set in the book. And I'm back invested in Daniel. He was not a great person, so I think he might make an excellent vampire. I'm really excited to see where he goes and what his tendencies are moving forward. Armand finally tells Louis that Lestat loved him. During the time in Paris, during that intervention in the 70s, that thing he was withholding because he was so threatened by Lestat, he finally feels comfortable to tell, and he does it just as Daniel rolls out that bomb about who actually saved Louis in Paris. And I've got to say, it makes so much more sense now that Armand was so upset about Louis still ranting and raving about Lestat, even if it's only to badmouth him back in San Fran. We can see that Louis really is in love with Lestat. He's only with Armand for revenge, and it has nothing to do with loving or caring about Armand. He's sort of like settled into this thing that he never really wanted or like felt deeply about. So Armand, knowing that he has like a deep, eternal connection to Lestat, one that he can't really even touch, and then hearing that he's still like hung up on his ex is like extra threatening. Plus, we get to see how Louis twists narratives to make Lestat the villain. It's an idea where he destroys the man and the memory when this one betrayal happens. And now we know that Armand is actually the one who did the betraying. This fate he's seeing Lestat's memory go through will be his own. So that's like another layer of terror and fear every time Lestat's mentioned in their relationship. And oh my god, I know there's gotta be an alternate version of the Armand-Lestat relationship that involves Nikki. I'm wondering if we're gonna find out that like Armand killed Nikki and that drove Lestat away, or if Armand manipulated Nikki into some kind of self-immolation and that drove Lestat away. But there's more going on there. And we've got Armand back on track to being like that obsessive, manipulative little bastard. All bets are off on what exactly happened in Paris, and I really hope we get to come back to that moment and relive it and get to see a new, more authentic perspective, because there's something going on there, and I just need that story so much, even though everyone else has moved on. I've got a note here saying that seeing this breakup was super satisfying. I've kind of been complaining because Armand and Louis are supposed to have broken up before Daniel even did the first interview, let alone the second one. So it's been like a major rewrite. But now that I got to see the breakup happen in person, I understand why they set it this way so that we could see it. Also, I like that Louis is driven to violence here the same way that Lestat was driven to violence all those years ago. And it's still about Claudia and them breaking up. It indicates that maybe Louis is the common denominator, or maybe Louis learned this violence from Lestat, which was like his first official relationship. There's some complicated themes or thoughts going on in the echoing of this dynamic within Louis-lover relationships. Granted, Louis doesn't brutalize Armand so much that he can't get up for months, so that's something. But it does give us an indication that Louis is perhaps significantly more dangerous than anyone who's read the books would be led to believe. They keep telling us he's a more powerful vampire here in this version. He seems to be embracing his vampirism and all the vampiric powers, but it is taking me a while to get it through my head. Moving into past Armand, he says Santiago suspected he'd rigged the audience, and I wrote down,
No shit.
Santiago told the audience that the only punishment for a guilty vampire is death, so they had no way of coming up with this banishment concept on their own. Obviously, somebody rigged the audience. I do wonder after the reveal if Armand actually was doing all this grunt work under Santiago's rule, or if Armand had been leader of the coven the whole time, and this is just like part of the story he tells people to make them more sympathetic to him. It could very much be that he was still the coven leader, presiding over everyone. The screams were getting to him. He was finding them annoying. So he lets Louis escape, and he sort of like tries to encourage him to shoo so he doesn't have to think about the guy anymore. I have in my notes that his explanation continues to be muddy and doesn't seem to match up. Like his actions and his words and all this other stuff just doesn't align. But we get the reveal later in the episode why that's the case, so I'm fine with this now. I do kind of wonder if we'll ever get Armand's true emotions or intentions with this act. How long was he part of the coven's plans? Was he kind of ambushed with it and forced to choose? Was there a breaking point between him and Louis where he just decided Louis wasn't worth it? And then once his coven was gone, did he just decide Louis was the only option, so he goes with this new spin on the story? There are a lot of possible scenarios. I'd like some more information on it. I'm not sure who would give it, because I don't know that there's anything Armand could say or do that would make me trust him again or make me believe he was telling the truth about what really happened here at Paris. I do have one logistics note. Even after he came to live with Louis, was he like going back and forth to the coven and coming in and out of his life? If so, didn't Louis ever wonder like where this dude was staying, since he told Louis he was kicked out of the coven? Also, I feel like it must have been a very definitive act to choose the coven if he spent all those nights alone with Louis and never once confided in him. It feels very counter to what a vampire companion is supposed to be. Another interesting note I have is this version of Armand knows about Akasha, and I can't wait to get to the story reveal where we find out how and why he knows about Akasha right now. Moving into the Vampire Coven, goodbye and good riddance. They got an epic, awesome end. Santiago earned that beheading. I'll be curious to see if Santiago comes back in later seasons, because simply beheading a vampire isn't enough to kill them in Anne Rice's interview, although I think they already mentioned in season 1 that it's enough in this version. So we will see if the laws remain consistent, or if we like surprise reveal beheading doesn't work in this universe either. It is a very interesting possibility to me that someone who might be a fan favorite could return. The fact that Sam survives is good for this plot point where we get an actual original of the script. I don't know that I care about it in a larger world than that, like Sam just didn't leave an impact on me, but it could be interesting to see him play roles in the Telemasca show or future roles in Interview with the Vampire going forward. We'll just have to see, I guess. Moving into Louis. That is a rough shove that guy did. And I'm wondering if these are like the explosive issues that Raglan James warned Daniel about, because Daniel like intuitively, rightly realizes that Armand is withholding something and he's potentially the dangerous one, and Raglan James corrects him and says he should focus on Louis. And I've got to wonder at this juncture why he said that, because as things have played out, it seems like Armand really was the dangerous one. But like this little violent bout from Louis, this reminder he's got that fire gift and he sets the laptop on fire, and that he can be angry and aggressive like this with Armand and then turn back to Daniel and be like a super cool, kind, polite cucumber, implies a high level of unstable danger. Also, Louis is a little bit wishy-washy. This is the second time he's called Daniel in for an interview and then changed his mind. He never does talk about the Great Conversion, so we still have no idea what that is or why it's a thing. And this Louis is significantly more violent, aggressive, confident, and like self-assured. We get that at the very end of this season when he like sends out a telepathic thought to everyone.
Hey, this is my address. This is my house. It's unlocked. Come and get me if you dare.
Book Louis would never. I just love this characterization of him. This is exciting and interesting and new and could lead to a lot of really different fun interactions from other vampires down the road. Moving into past Louis, my first question was, how long is Louis in that coffin? In the books, he's only there a night. But for him to be like starving to death, losing his sanity, all of that kind of thing, it had to have been much longer. And I am curious exactly how much longer, because that gives us like a really good grip on power structure and how much vampires need blood. I love that he's mentally repeating his entire life and making different choices and trying to like map out different ways that things could have gone so that maybe things wouldn't have come to this. And I love that the conclusion he comes to is it doesn't even matter. It's all the same. Lestat was inevitable, Claudia is inevitable, and Claudia's demise also 100% unavoidable. This is a similar conclusion to what Louis comes to a little bit later on in the books, but Louis in the books is like such a sad, defeated sack of whatever for no apparent reason, because when he comes to this conclusion, it's after he's got vengeance on the Paris Coven and he's been like free roaming the world, enjoying nature and humanity and comfortably killing without remorse. So like that just made me want to punch Book Louis and be very frustrated with him and like shake him. I empathize a lot with the book version's Daniel, who's like, no, it doesn't have to be that way. However, the way the show portrays this exact same sentiment with Louis trapped in a coffin, starving to death, no way out, and realizing that there is no choice or way to avoid this, it makes a lot more sense. He's fallen into this depression. I can see a sort of comfort in it for him too as he's there slowly dying. So it makes like this indulgent moment of sorrow like very more empathetic and relatable to me than it is in the books, and it's like such a great narrative beat where it's placed here and why it's here. It's also really interesting to me that this version of Louis made this plan and thinks it's a suicide mission, where the book Louis made this plan and always intended to survive. In fact, escape is part of the plan. This version of Louis has been determined to survive, has enjoyed life, has found like joy and happiness in a way that the book version never does. And meanwhile, book version Louis wants to die, is miserable, thinks he's like evil and unmutably so. But even though they have these completely different takes, and you would think the one that loves life would plan to live and the one that hates life would plan to die this way, it's reversed. I do have a note about Louis intending to quote unquote die, but he still grabs Claudia's dress and her journals, and that's not really the act of a man intending to die. Even though he keeps saying he intended to die and that this was a suicide mission, it's more like Louis had accepted death as a possible outcome and hadn't necessarily planned for a future. Which, you know, this version of Louis is not a planner anyway, so I don't really know how he would have planned for a future. When he says the rage was replaced by nothingness, this is very book accurate. It's eventually what makes Armand leave him. The difference here is the rage being replaced by nothingness lasts maybe a night for show Louis, where it lasts hundreds of years for the book version. Louis confronts Lestat, angry again, accusatory, the whole 9 yards. And I do think it's notable that he chooses Armand while confronting Lestat only as a punishment. And in some ways, I think remaining with Armand is a punishment for Louis as well, because it will continually remind him of Paris. And it will remind him that he stayed here, that he trusted Armand, that Armand led Claudia to her end. That this is all Louis deserves, is to be with a betrayer. It puts a whole new spin on their relationship. It makes sense to me why Armand is so insecure, and it also makes sense to me why Louis is so passive. Like, he's almost created his own life sentence here, because to punish Lestat, he also sort of has to punish himself by remaining someplace I don't think he ever really wanted to be. And then lastly, but not least, Lestat. We're going through this Paris story, and the whole time I'm thinking,
But where's Lestat? Please tell me we're gonna see this dude in Paris. We're gonna get a little bit more of him in this moment.
So I love that we go ahead and see him in Magnus's lair ruminating on Claudia's death. We get that brief flashback where he's angry at the coven and sort of accuses them of underestimating Claudia, her strength, her anger, her will. It shows Lestat's love, but it also shows that he loves Claudia only so much and as she's a reflection of the best of his vampiric nature. I like the name drop of Akasha. I like the little lore that because he took her blood, he can't be killed without his own consent. That's going to be a really interesting element if we have to face off against Akasha, because it means we have to make Akasha want death too, right? Or else she also can't be killed. It does make me wonder why she's part of those who must be kept, but maybe it's more about keeping her from revealing the vampire secret to mortals than it is about keeping her safe from the sun. The moment between Lestat and Louis at the end where it seems like the two of them might reconcile and come to a new understanding, that was so beautifully done and it was wonderful. It's the first time we get something like that on screen, and it's also the first time the two of them come together and really mourn Claudia as a whole. I liked that resolution for us as an audience. It's a resolution we eventually get in the books, but it's certainly not an interview with a vampire. I think we might get a start of it in the Vampire Lestat, but it happens throughout the Chronicles. It makes their relationship so much more explicit. It gives them a chance for future interactions, and it leaves us on like this hopeful note for both of them. So let's move into some specific scenes. How Louis explains about vampires in their coffins is obviously not a thing in the books. In the books, it's just when the sun comes out, vampires fall comatose. So Louis stays up, fights the pull of the sun, and as these vampires have already settled and it's going to be too late for them to escape, he does the gasoline thing and then he himself escapes into a coffin and goes comatose. But since this show has decided that vampires can be awake during the day and even can be in indirect sunlight, they have to do something different. The way this is explained and very heavy-handedly thrown in there makes it feel like a convenient nonsense thing for the sake of the same scene we got in the book, because there's been a lot of times we've seen Louis, Lestat, Claudia in their coffins still active and lively, waking up, all this kind of stuff. So this comatose state the coffin draws them into doesn't make any sense. I wish they had mentioned it or it had become an issue sometime earlier in season 2 if we were retconning this to make all this flow. Dropping it like an exposition bomb here at the end, it's
No, I don't buy that.
and this wouldn't be a Jess review video if there wasn't a moment that I didn't like somewhere in the episode, right? And closing out with those themes, memory is a monster. I love the way this tagline comes back and it sort of replays the original Paris scene and shows us that perhaps it was Lestat who saved Louis and not Armand. The fact that Armand doesn't deny who is actually Louis' savior, the fact that he doesn't have a good or strong arguments for all these notes and his directing the play. It reframes everything we just watched and does it in such a way to cover up both potential show inconsistencies and things that were intentionally dropped to let us know something was up. The who am I supposed to love question is even more up in the air now. We're gonna get so much more vampire love story drama and I can't wait. The this is not a life and that's because you took my life element. Again, I love this. We're seeing the cycle repeat potentially with Daniel and Armand right now. We're also getting a chance for Louis living his life for himself on his own for the first time in his entire existence. And this is going to be a huge exploration for him, almost more so I would think than him in his time in Paris. And I'm excited to see who Louis really is and what he really wants. I'm excited to see who Daniel is as a vampire and what he wants. I am hopeful we're going to get so much more Lestat time than we got this past season. He was fun as a ghost, he was fun as a hallucination, and it was great to see him back in person in these memories. But I would love if the next season was Daniel interviewing Lestat and getting his side of things. Or even Daniel following Lestat in his rock band career, if that's where we're going with this. I don't know, but there's so many possibilities, so many interesting parts and things. I can't wait for season 3. And that's gonna be both what I think about Interview with the Vampire season 2 and this episode 8 finale specifically. But talk to me. What did you think about this season? Tell me in those comments down below. And if you've got nothing else to say and you got this far in the video, leave me a vampire emoji. And as always, keep reading.